The president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, held a meeting with lawmakers of the National People's Power of China to strengthen cooperation and friendship ties with the Asian giant. Heads of state and government from the Global South continue to arrive in Cuba as Havana hosts the G77 plus China Summit. In Libya, survivors of the catastrophe brought on by the storm Daniel are still looking for their loved ones. Hello from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. The president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, offered a press conference from Beijing on Thursday, in which he made a balance of his official tour of China that lasted almost a week. The Venezuelan head of state emphasized that with the meeting he held with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, the bilateral relationship was elevated to a foolproof and all-weather strategic partnership. Within this framework, a total of 31 cooperation agreements were signed during the 17th meeting of the China-Venezuela High-Level Commission. The agreements include areas such as Belt and Road, economy and trade, education, tourism, science and technology, health, aerospace, and civil aviation, among others. The Venezuelan president highlighted the Asian giant's solidarity with Venezuela by condemning the unilateral sanctions and sending medicines during the COVID-19 pandemic.
We will always remember the support of China, condemning the criminal sanctions against Venezuela, facing those sanctions, and we will always remember for all times the solidarity of China so that medicines, antivirals and vaccines could reach Venezuela in the worst moment of the COVID-19.
And the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, affirmed that together with the Chinese government, they agreed to work within the framework of the United Nations to condemn the unilateral coercive measures used by the United States and its allies.
To continue denouncing within the framework of the UN sanctions, blockades, financial, commercial and economic persecution, damages, crimes against humanity, against people through economic warfare. So we have ratified the strengthening of the group of defenders of the United Nations Charter between China and Venezuela, and to make it the central element of strategy so that sooner rather than later the UN condemns and reverses the systems of unilateral coercive measures.
Afterwards, the president, Nicolás Maduro Moros, held a meeting with the Assembly of the National People's Power of China to strengthen cooperation and friendship ties with the Asian giant. The Venezuelan president, Nicolás Maduro Moros, described as successful and productive the meeting with representatives of the public powers in China and the president of the Standing Committee of the Assembly, Zhao Leji. Likewise, the head of the Beijing parliament highlighted the historical ties of friendship between Venezuela and China and saluted the efforts of the Venezuelan head of state in firmly promoting the friendly relations between both countries for a long time. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan leader also met with the Prime Minister of the Republic of China, Li Qian, a strategic meeting aimed at consolidating the friendship between both countries.
I am happy to be in this assembly. I have visited on many occasions as a deputy, as President of the National Assembly of Venezuela, and as President of the Republic, because I appreciate the work you do for the development of China, for the strengthening of China, and I appreciate the friendship we have cultivated between the National People's Assembly of China and the people and the National Assembly of Venezuela. I want to convey to you a message of solidarity greetings from the President of the National Assembly of Venezuela, Comrade Jorge Rodriguez, and the entire legislative body of the country. This visit may have been extraordinary.
In this context, the Venezuelan popular leader also described his tour of Asia as historic due to the 31 agreements reached with the Asian giant.
All the working days, all the agreements, all the plans, all the documents approved and signed in Shenzhen, in Shanghai, in Shandong. We arrived in Shenzhen in the middle of a storm. We landed in the middle of a heavy rain. and a truly historic tour began. And then our arrival in Beijing, the working days, the signing of 31 agreements.
For her part, on Thursday, the Executive Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, visited the Chinese company CITIC Construction Group. Venezuela strengthens cooperation with China in housing construction as part of the bilateral agreements signed by both presidents in recent days. The Vice President's visit preceded that of the President of the nation, signing 31 cooperation agreements in infrastructure, technology, education, and the Belt and Road Initiative. CITIC Groups is a Chinese construction company aimed to generate sustainable shareholder value. This visit takes place in the context of the historic visit of President Nicolás Maduro to the Asian giant. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. Heads of state and government from the Global South continue to arrive in Cuba as Havana hosts the G77 plus China Summit. After the arrival of the President of Laos, Thongloun Sisoulith, Cuban head of state Miguel Díaz-Canel held talks with his counterpart to strengthen political dialogue and party ties. Díaz-Canel also received Iran's Vice President for Science, Technology and Economic Affairs, the presidents of Palestine and South Africa, as well as government authorities from Nepal. The G77 plus China Summit will be held on September 15th and 16th under the theme The Current Challenges of Development, the Role of Science, Technology and Innovation. And how paramount is the G77 and China Summit to be held in Havana? What is the world going through today? What is the current world economic situation like, and what are its prospects? These answers and the answers to these questions in the following work by our correspondent in Havana, Fabiola Lopez.
In the voice of one of Cuba's most prominent figures on economic matters, José Luis Rodríguez, the world is on the verge of an outbreak of the crisis the planet is experiencing today. Price hikes due to product shortage, broken trade links, the paralysis of 30% of the world's wheat supply due to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the forecast of very 2.4% of growth of the world economy, and the debts of the underdeveloped world exceeding $9 trillion are only some of the features of the dire economic situation that humanity is experiencing.
In the next 5 years, growth will not exceed 3%, and this logically implies, in a different way in the world, falls in production, increasing social issues. There are very serious problems with migration in the world today, which is a factor that has gained enormous strength, especially since the pandemic. In other words, factors that worsen an already existing crisis. And given this situation, certain measures must be adopted, which is why the summit is so important.
At the recently concluded 15th summit of the BRICS, the Cuban president warned that the group of 77 and China have a responsibility to advocate for a change in the current order. It is not an option, said the Cuban leader, it is the only alternative.
It has been a historic demand of the G77 and also of the BRICS to undertake a real transformation of the international financial architecture, which is today deeply unjust, outdated, and dysfunctional.
23 years ago, at the South Summit held in Havana, the historic leader of the Cuban Revolution warned about the challenges of that time, which have now worsened.
For the group of 77, the present time cannot be one of pleading to developed countries, nor of submission, defeatism, or internal divisions, but of rescuing our fighting spirit, of unity and cohesion around our demands. We were promised 50 years ago that one day there would be no gap between developed and underdeveloped countries. We were promised bread and justice. And today, there is less and less bread and less justice.
However, in the face of such challenges in today's world, in the opinion of the expert José Luis Rodríguez, there are solutions, but he warns that solutions can only be found when there is unity. Unity, he explains, can create the capacity to mobilize resources politically, socially, and economically to find alternatives.
There are solutions, and I believe that in the long or short term, socialism is the only alternative. The capitalist world does not offer solutions. There is the Washington Consensus and all the effects of the peak of neoliberalism that have led to many of the tragedies we have today, to realize that this system does not work. Or let's say it statistically, it works for 20% of humanity, the other 80% is excluded.
The Cuban president said that the time for collective action is not tomorrow, it is now, to move towards a fairer and more sustainable future.
Fabiola López, TeleSUR, La Habana.
Let's see other stories. On Wednesday, Brazil's Supreme Federal Court began the first 4 criminal trials on the defendants involved in the coup actions of January 8th of this year. These are the first 4 Bolsonaristas to be tried for the role in the invasion and looting of the buildings of the 3 branches of government in Brazil. The defendants, Aécio Lúcio Costa Pereira, Thiago de Assis Matar, Moazir José dos Santos, and Mateus Lima de Carvalho Lázaro, will answer for crimes such as armed criminal association, violent abolition of the democratic rule of law, and coup d'etat. The trial began with the presentation of the case by Minister Alexandre de Moraes.
On January 8, 243 people were arrested in the act inside public buildings and in the Three Powers Square. On January 9, 1,927 people were taken to the National Police Academy.
The criminal action engineered by the agents in which the defendant participated had the nefarious motive of continuously preventing the regular exercise of constitutional powers and provoking the deposition of the legitimately constituted government.
In Brazil, marches by indigenous women from several regions of the country continue, seeking the demarcation and protection of their lands. Under the slogan, Women Biomes in Defense of Biodiversity Through Ancestral Roots, thousands of indigenous women mobilized in Brazil to defend their rights and demand demarcation of their lands and the end of illegal mining. In this sense, next September the 20th, the vote on the time frame will be taken up again at the Supreme Court, a key trial for indigenous peoples and their ancestral territories. In Peru, workers of the Administrative Services contract regime marched on Wednesday to demand labor improvements from the government. Workers from different parts of the country gathered at the San Martín Square in Lima, the capital of Peru, from where they began a march towards the National Congress to demand from the government agencies and the Ministry of Finance a labor system with decent benefits for all public employees. The main demand for the workers is the payment of bonuses offered in the month of July and which they have not received so far.
We, the state workers, are in a national day of struggle, mainly to stop the abuses and lies of the Minister of Economy and Finance. One of the first lies is to have signed a collective agreement for a special bonus of 600 sols that should have been paid in July. We are already at the end of September, and he has not yet presented a supplementary credit bill. It lies upon lies. He signs an agreement and makes public offers and does not fulfill them. Besides the abuses of his officials against the right to collective bargaining that has cost us 42 years to achieve.
In the United States, a federal judge blocked part of an order suspending the right to carry guns in public in the Albuquerque metropolitan area in the state of New Mexico. The measure partially reverses a public health order issued by New Mexico's Governor Michelle Lujan, who based her decision on local violent crime statistics that have claimed the lives of minors. Federal Judge David Urias found that the governor was acting in good faith in trying to prevent further fatalities, but could not confiscate the rights granted to citizens by the Constitution. The plaintiffs who brought the court ruling argued that the governor has other options to address this issue. We have a second short break coming up, but before, we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at TeleSUR English, and there you will be able to re-watch our interviews, the top stories, the special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. We have a final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back. In Libya, 3 days after the port city of Derna was practically wiped out by the storm Daniel, the survivors of the catastrophe are looking for their loved ones. Storm Daniel not only ravaged a sleeping city with all its fury, but also burst the dams, and the resulting floods engulfed everything in their path. Many people lost dozens of family members in this catastrophe. Islamic Relief warned late Wednesday that the figure is likely to double or even quadruple. The Libyan Red Crescent said on Thursday morning that another 10,000 people are missing, a figure that could be higher. The storm affected both Greece and Libya. In Greece, there were only 6 fatalities, while in Libya, the death toll rose to 6,000, according to statements by the Islamic Relief's Deputy Director of Partner Development. And Lebanon sent a military plane with humanitarian aid to Libya, departing from Marka military airport in Amman. A senior official said that his country's government remains in close cooperation with the Libyan authorities. Let's hear it.
We are in continuous communication with authorities there to assess their needs and to know whether they need more aid. We focused in this shipment on basic necessities, such as food and relief aid like tents, blankets, and whatever needed in such conditions, in addition to food parcels suitable for such situations.
Italian military and firefighters load material, including inflatable boats, onto a plane at Pisa airport before it heads to flood-hit Libya. On Wednesday, the Italian Defense Ministry announced it will send a ship and 2 planes to the North African country to deliver material and help rescue efforts following the catastrophic floods that have left at least thousands dead and missing. Iran and Iraq announced that the implementation of a security agreement reached to confront terrorism will start on Friday. The announcement was made by the diplomatic heads of both nations who met this Wednesday in Tehran. Both the Iraqi Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein and his Iranian counterpart Hossein Amir Abdollahian spoke positively to the agreement or of the agreement signed earlier this year to protect their common border, especially in the Kurdish region of northern Iraq. The agreement comes after a series of attacks perpetrated by Iran against Iraqi territory, targeting armed groups sheltering on the other side of the border. The agreement commits the states to disarm the insurgent groups and withdraw their bases, the deployment of border guards to prevent infiltration of militants across the border, and the handover to Iran to suspects or of suspects wanted under the law.
We have received very good information about the elimination of terrorist groups from areas near the borders of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Their relocation deep into Iraqi territory and the Kurdish region of the Republic of Iraq, and the efforts to disarm them and fully implement the clauses of the security agreement between the two countries. The next steps will be fully implemented in the coming days within the framework of the security agreement.
Meanwhile, Iraqi Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein stressed the viability of dialogue as a means of obtaining permits and consents in order to confront irregular groups that use the border crossing.
El tema que quiero enfatizar es que las relaciones entre los dos países son buenas.
The issue I want to emphasize is that the relations between the two countries are good, and we hope that if there are some problems, They will be solved through dialogue and negotiations. Sometimes we see that the sovereignty of Iraq, the Kurdistan region of Iraq, is threatened with bombing or a military attack. I think we should move away from these tools because we have other ways. We have a way to talk and negotiate. We have a security agreement.
In Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam, at least 56 people are reported dead after a fire in an apartment building. The fire in the 9-story building killed at least 56 people, including 4 children, while 37 others are being treated at a hospital. The fire started around midnight on Wednesday and was extinguished in the early hours of the morning. Rescue operations continue throughout the day. The injured suffered smoke inhalation and various injuries as they tried to flee the flames. So far, it is unknown what caused the fire. However, authorities have detained the owner of the building to investigate whether safety regulations were breached. And we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.